My guest today is murdering a podcast. Find out how he's getting away with it in this episode. Hello, Steve, and welcome to Engage.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
No, the pleasure is all mine. I'm really glad that we got the opportunity to do this, actually, because we'd only just connected on social media, and this has all happened quite quickly, setting up this episode. So today I don't feel as well prepared as I usually like to be when I have guests on the Engage show. But I've had a look at some of the stuff that you've been up to, and I'm sure everything's going to be great, and we'll be able to create a great episode here. So just to give you a bit of an introduction, Steve, you're an entrepreneur based in the United Kingdom. You're the director of the Mystery Lounge, which is a murder mystery company. Not only that, you're also a filmmaker. You're a wildlife and landscape photographer. You're
Yes.
a comedy writer,
Yes.
and now a podcaster as well, and also a digital product creator.
I mean, many people would call me a Renaissance man because my views are stuck in the 1600s. But yes,
But yeah, you sound like you're a creative guy, so I'm sure that we're going to get along famously in this episode, and we're going to have a lot to talk about as well. So what I thought we would do is to have a talk about all of the different things that you've been involved with that we've just mentioned, and how that has all culminated into the new podcast that you're currently working on, and also a training program which you've put together, which is all about podcasting as well. So it's going to be that journey from A to Z, and we'll try and fit in as much of the stuff along the way as possible.
I mean, I can be here all night. That's just just to warn people.
Yeah, just before we get into all of that, if I can just get a bit of background on you, first of all, because like I said, we've only recently just met, so I don't really know that much about you. So this is going to be a great opportunity for me, as well as the audience as well, to find out what you're all about. So first of all, can you give us a bit of background on where you're from and where you grew up?
Well, I was born at a very early age in Gloucester in the United Kingdom, which everybody always says, well, where is that? And it's basically on the border with Wales, basically. There's a few sort of villages and things over, but the next thing that's like Ross-on-Wye, and then there's Wales. So I've spent my life living in what is a city very close to a lot of countryside. Both my parents are photographers. Mum a little bit more so than Dad. Dad's also a magician, and so I suppose right from when I was young, I was always kind of around that creative stuff one way or another. And then I started singing, I suppose, when I was 11 or 12 years old. I started getting interested in books when I was like 9 or 10 years old. And I was in the Gloucester gang show with the Cubs, and that was the thing that first sort of pushed me into doing some sort of acting or stage stuff. Also, even though I was just essentially a squirrel with a tail made out of a coat hanger that would often get shoved up your bum. It wasn't the most pleasant thing in the world, but it was one of those things where, you know, you've done something and suddenly you'll get hooked on it, and then that's what you want to do for the rest of your life. By the time I was 14, I at one point wandered into a bar that was doing comedy. It had a comedy night, and I'd sat and watched a comedian, and as he was talking, I'd written down extra jokes that he could do in his set. And in my naive way, I went up and I handed that to him and said, "You might like these."
Yeah, these are all the things that you missed.
God bless him. He didn't tell me to go and sod off. He actually he gave me £1 and he said, "Never give anybody a joke unless they pay you for it." And I heard a few weeks later that he'd actually used one or two of those jokes the following week in that set. So then by the time I was when I was 14, 15 years old, I was submitting material to BBC Radio. We have a very diverse radio offering on Radio 4 in this country, which does a lot of comedy and a lot of drama. And the way that you were originally got into it, and sadly there isn't really anything like that at the moment. But what used to happen was there would be certain shows they would allow anybody to submit to, and if you got your work on, which was very rare, you would get a producer come along and say, well, maybe you'd like to have a go at writing this, and they would give you more of an assignment to do rather than something else. So the last years of school and sort of the first years of college, I spent time writing as a kind of a side a hobby, really, I suppose, for BBC Radio. Suddenly realised there was no money in it. If you sell a joke to the BBC for radio, you get about £6 from it, and that's it. Considering the amount of jokes that don't get on that you've written, that's not enough to keep you going. So you need to do something else. And I started writing then for science fiction and fantasy magazines, of which there were many and varied and plentiful at the time, because this was all kind of pre the big internet bang. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I eventually. So what happens when you want to become an author is that you will start to write these short stories, and then you will send them off, and then you will hear nothing. And so you'll try again, and you'll try again, and at one point you'll get a rejection letter. And there's one of two ways you can go. You can either go, oh, well, that's it, I'm rubbish, I clearly can't do that, nobody's writing to me, the only person who has sent me a rejection letter. But what you don't realise is that rejection letter is the first step of acceptance. And so the more you write, the more rejection letters you get, until eventually you get a rejection letter which tells you what they didn't like about you. So it's not just a kind of a spog standard, here's a letter, and then that's it. It's somebody's actually taken the time to write to you and go, well, we don't want this for this thing. This is what we didn't like about it, but submit in the future. And it means you're getting on with it. It means you're actually getting somewhere. So eventually you get those acceptance letters, and you learn the house styles and things. And I started selling fairly regularly written stories to various magazines, and at that point the internet had just started to come into a point where people weren't reading stuff online as much, but you could submit stuff online, so you could write for anywhere all over the world, which is just incredible. Went to college to do performing arts, got a degree in performing arts, went back to university to do multimedia and media communications, which wasn't a BA, a Bachelor of the Arts. It was a Bachelor of the Sciences, because it was because again, early days of the internet, they called it multimedia, but it was essentially this is how you make a website, and this is how you make a website that does things in Flash or in Shockwave or in So.
Yeah, I went to university in 1998 here in South Wales, so yeah, that rings a bell for me, because I did media studies, and there was like a multimedia segment of that, and that was really basic web pages and that, yeah, really got outdated very quickly.
We went into it quite deeply, enough to be able to do. We programmed one of the first shopping carts that Flash had, but then we didn't do anything with it. In retrospect, we probably should have tried to sell it, but we didn't know any better at the time. So yeah, I did that. The bottom fell out of writing at that point. Because what happened was people started to want to read stuff online. And instead of buying magazines, they were going to websites. And so you got from writing for between 5 to 7 cents per word for your story. So, a 10,000 word story could be relatively lucrative, and you could sell more than one of them a week if you could write more than one of them a week. To getting between half a cent and 1 cent per word per story. And it was suddenly like, you can't do this anymore. This isn't the job that it once was.
Did you do any more comedy writing after that then?
I mean, I was always comedy writing during this. I mean, I had a foray into doing stand-up at one point as well, but it didn't work out because I realised I didn't like all the travelling. I was spending daytimes at college. This is when I was doing performing arts. Daytimes at college, then I'd go off in the evening to some remote pub somewhere in the middle of nowhere, or you'd have to head to London, and then that would be a big thing, and you could never get gigs at the weekend because everybody wanted to gig at the weekend. So, I was phoned up once and said, "Are you free this evening?" I said, "Yes." "Could you drive to Portsmouth?" That's a bit of a way, but you do it, and then and I very quickly realised actually that wasn't for me. After the second degree, I kind of went, though, I need to make money, I need to earn something. Started working in web design, and I was there for ages until I decided this. Well, actually, I started suffering with severe anxiety and depression, which was obviously, which kind of linked to the job and linked to the place that I was working more than anything else, and quit that. And the following Monday, I wrote to them on the Friday when I got home. I said, "I can't do this anymore. That's it. I'm out." The following Monday, I decided I'm starting my own business, and I haven't sort of looked back from that.
Yeah. Do you think then that obviously you come from a very creative background, from your parents as well, all the way through what you've been doing with the writing and the performing arts and that, and even though you've got into web design, which does give you that degree of creativity to some extent, do you think that you just felt really stifled, and you just think there was no creative release there for you?
No, there is a lot of creativity in websites. The problem was always the clients, and because you're kind of buffered from the clients when you're working in web design, somebody else goes out and gets them for you, but that means that somebody else sets their expectations for you as well. So when you get back and you get a project and you go, "This is really exciting, we're going to do all of this with it," and somebody said, "No, you can't do all of that with it because the budget is this P that we're going to give you right now, and that's it," that was the problem. It was that, and sort of the environment that I was working in, and the kind of the people that I was working with at the time. I had several good years working in web design with people who were great, but then when you're in that situation and you think, "Well, I don't know where I'm going to go from here," something snaps and you go, "Well, I can't carry on doing what I'm doing." And in the time that I was doing the web design as well, I'd also started doing filmmaking. I love film. It's my absolute passion is film. You see all the DVDs and things that I've got sat there. So yeah, we'd set up with some friends. We did some short films. We submitted them to film festivals. That's how I got myself on IMDb. There were other creative projects that I was doing at the time. I was still singing. I at some point in that whole timeline, I learned how to play the guitar.
I'm actually intrigued by the IMDb credit. So how did that come about, or what film did you create then, which gave you that credit on IMDb?
The first one, well, we set up a production company called Papyrus, which was a partnership, really, so it wasn't like a limited company or anything. The first thing that we did was called The Ministry, and this is when I'd been working with the BBC for quite some time anyway, and Doctor Who had just come back, or was on the cusp of coming back, which I'd been an extra in the first thing. Like a group of us went to Cardiff for a night and did a night shoot in just outside the stadium in Cardiff, where we had to run away from some burning buildings and things. And so we knew it was coming on, and we knew that there was something going on. So I got together with some friends who I'd known from radio, who all of us wanted to see if we could break into TV, because we knew the people who did Dead Ringers and things like that, and they'd all managed it. And so we thought, well, there's a chance there. And so we pitched them something which would have been a companion piece to Doctor Who. It wasn't set in the same universe or anything, but it would have been you've seen this, now go and watch this sort of thing, which the BBC do pick up on stuff like that every so often. And the next thing we'd heard was they'd commissioned a series called Torchwood. And then that was it. because that was literally set in the same universe and everything, companion piece to Doctor Who. So, but that happens all the time. That is the thing. So the first thing we did with Burnt Papyrus was a pilot of a script that I wrote called The Ministry, which would have been that. So we pitched that to the BBC, and then it was, well, what do we do next? So we did a short film called The Deacon Suite, where we got some great people in to do that with, and every time we've done something, we've tried to kind of up the game of what we're able to do with it as well. Much like, I suppose, you would do with this, every time you record another episode of a podcast, you say, okay, have I got my mic positioned in the right place, or do I use this EQ curve instead of the last one, or whatever it is that you try and do. So at that point, we tried to just do more and more films. We did one called The Trial, which is still unedited on my computer for various reasons, it petered out. This is when I was becoming horribly depressed as well, so that's kind of why it happened. We did one called The Ball, which all of those things are on YouTube, in fact. And once we'd finished them, we submitted them to festivals. And if you get into a festival, into the right festivals, you get to have a credit on IMDb, and it is that simple.
Which festival did you manage to get in then?
I have absolutely no idea. We wrote to so many of them, and it just popped up one day that it was there. So yeah, it's. I think if you were doing it more seriously, you would have kind of written down every single festival you'd applied to and whether they got anything back. But I remember getting an email back from them, "Oh, we got into this one, and that's it," and that was it. And because you didn't go to it, you showed it digitally, which meant you sent them a file or you sent them a DVD, and then they played it from the DVD. So.
You've done so much though over the years. You've created more films than Steven Spielberg, by the sounds of it.
Well, no, we've only done a couple. I think by the time that he was my age, he'd had an Oscar, at least one Oscar, if not two. So.
Oh, well, you got something to aspire to there. But where does the where does the murder mystery side of things come into all of this then? Because surely you wouldn't have had any time to set anything else up with all of these other things that you've had going on.
Well, I didn't. Tash did that. I met Tash when we were at college. We both did the performing arts course, although we were in different years. And she dated a guy that I was in a comedy duet band thing with. And she posted something out onto Facebook that said, I'm bored, COVID's happening, everyone was in furlough at that point, we need something to do, could anybody help us with the technical aspects of setting up a podcast so we could do a sort of scripted thing? And of course I've got experience in radio and I've got a fair amount of experience with various technical things, and so I said, okay, well, I'll message her and see if I can help with anything. And she'd created this company called the Mystery Lounge, and the whole idea of it was to do live murder mystery things. And just before she signed the contracts to say, yes, we will rent this building, and this building will be where we have all of our murder mysteries in Stoke-on-Trent. She's not in Gloucester. The COVID thing happened, and thank God it wasn't just a little bit later. I think it was about 2 weeks. I'm sure she'll correct me later on when she sees this, but I think it was about 2 weeks before she was due to sign the papers or something ridiculous like that. So very close call. Anyway, she'd written something to say, does anybody want to do something creative over this period? And I said, yeah, I'll help out if you want. I put her in touch with a wonderful editor called Georgina, who is actually one of the people that I stream games with on Monday and Tuesday nights on Twitch. And I was doing everything else. So I ended up making four websites, which the first one was the sort of the main Mystery Lounge website. And the second one was the Viral Murders website. The Viral Murders was the podcast that we ended up making, which had certain things that it needed to do. And then the places that it's set is called Kiltondale. So I made a website for the Kiltondale Parish Council. And in these websites, we had loads of clues hidden around. So if you were listening to it on a regular basis, you could have a look through these websites. There was a little chat bot on there. If you type the right thing onto the chat bot, you got a clue. If you click the right hidden link on the page, you got other clues and things like that. So that was a lot of fun to do. And I had to do a lot of extra kind of writing around the subject to do that because, of course, they were busy doing other things as well. I was also there when we were recording, and we were trying to find the best way of recording 8 or 9 people all at once without having a horrible feeds or anything. And we came across this program called Clean Feed, which was originally created, I think, for musicians more or for broadcast more than it was for anything else. But it was very much like we're using a thing now called Riverside to record tonight. It was very much like using Riverside, only it didn't have the video element. So we would all come into a Zoom chat on a Sunday night, which is when we recorded, so that people could make it. And then we would all slowly log into Clean Feed and switch off the audio on Zoom. So we were listening to people through Clean Feed, but we could see them through the other, and we give people visual cues. And then we recorded. But afterwards, Avadni and Tash, who were the current directors of the company, said, "Do you want to come on board as a director?" And then it sort of went from there, really.
Yeah, so you'd recorded all of these episodes in advance then, or were you recording one and then publishing it, and then, based on, I suppose, the interaction from the audience, then were you then creating subsequent episodes?
The idea was that it would be completely interactive, but it was basically a script, and you could have made some decisions. We very quickly realised we could record stuff faster than Georgie could edit it. Because she wasn't just doing let's put all the voices together and cut out a few silences and stuff. She did a really amazing job creating soundscapes for this thing, which is going farther than we're looking at doing in our next projects. But it was fantastic. It sounded really good. She did a whole load of audio work on cleaning up people's voices where they had to use the microphone they had. They didn't necessarily have the right microphones or even access to a nice room to record in or anything like that. So we could record relatively quickly, but the edit took ages, and each episode was about 40 minutes long, and there were 6 episodes. And early on, we realised we can't get more than about 1 episode out every month. So I said, look, consistency is the big thing with podcasts. I knew that then, that my job was to go out and figure out all the technical things that we needed to do, figure out all the strategy stuff that we needed to do, so that we would kind of do as well as we could with the project that we got. And I said to them, look, if we can't put out something every single week, and it doesn't look like we're going to be able to, every other week is at least feels more like more content, even if it isn't. So we made the decision to switch to break the episodes in half, which actually worked out really well in the end. So we ended up with 12 episodes going out over 24 weeks. So that was half the year we were putting content out for an audience that was slowly growing. That we got ended up with an email list of about it was just under 1,000 people, because we just had that conversation. Do we bother paying for this on the off chance that we get a few more subscribers, or do we wait until we get a few more subscribers? So that was on one of the services that will give you 1,000 subscribers for free, So we built that email list up. We'd run some ads. We were very lucky. We got funding from the National Lottery. Now, both myself and Tash, like I said, done performing arts courses, and when you do that, and then when you add in business stuff into that as well, and kind of understand a little bit more about how the performing arts business works, or rather the arts industry works, then suddenly you think about things a bit differently, and suddenly you do go, well, actually, no, the National Lottery does have this pool of money that it saves for artists. Maybe there's something there that we can go for. And we found out that there was, and Tash sorted out the paperwork and everything. And we ended up getting a grant, which meant that everybody on the project got paid for what they were doing, which was great.
Yeah, I remember when we chatted prior to recording as well, and you mentioned the lottery fund, and I was actually quite surprised that something like that was available. Do you think that it was because it was more of a drama-based production rather than perhaps something like what we're doing here, which was what made you eligible for that?
Definitely, yeah. Anything artistic, there is money around for it if you can find it. The more money that you need for artistic projects, the places are there. You just need to know where to go, and that's the big thing, is finding out where to go. Now, we don't know everything. I couldn't say fund a film. I know that there is funding available for films, but I couldn't go out there and fund because I don't know the places to go. I don't know how to contact the investors and which investors to contact. There is information if we ever wanted to do it to find out about that. And there are plenty of people in the industry who will go, well, maybe we can help you with that as well, which is great. But also, it's the arts, and everybody else is trying to do it as well. You know, it's the biggest industry in the world. If you add in the kind of the gaming element to it as well, games, Hollywood, the individual countries' film things. The amount of money that you can get for whether you're putting on a play or a ballet production or something through local governments, through national governments, there is money all over the place for it. But there are so many people who are trying to vie for that money at the same time.
Yeah, but perhaps because you say you come from that background, where you perhaps know where to look and know the right wording to use as part of the application, perhaps that's what helped.
Yeah, I think if you're kind of in the industry, you kind of get that idea about, oh, well, they've asked this question, this is the answer that they want, whereas I'm not sure people could do it from outside. Although, if you look at some of the successes that have been on places like Kickstarter, you could do it, you just need to be a bit smart about the way that you actually put it all together and get that funding in the first place.
Do you think without that funding that you would have had the drive to complete 12 episodes, and do you think that you would have grown the audience in the way that you were able to grow it? You mentioned there that you had an email list of about 1,000 subscribers on it.
We would have done the actual project. The project would have gone ahead and gone out, and because initially when we all signed up for it, it was going to be something we were doing for free over furlough, but the project would have happened. I don't think we would have got as big a list, because one of the things that funding was able to do was it helped us run a couple of competitions. So the person who got the thing right at the end, who figured out who the murderer was, all of those people went into a hat, and one of them was picked out, and they got a prize at the end of it. We wouldn't have been able to afford to give somebody a prize if we were doing that to start off with. That helps get people interested in it, because it helps. Anything like that will pique people's greed. To go, oh well, I'll just try that just in case. And it also allowed us to do some Facebook advertising for it as well. And again, we didn't focus the Facebook advertising on this is a murder mystery. That was a big part of it, but we were also doing a competition as well. So join up to it, listen to a few episodes, get a question right, and then you can enter into this prize draw for... It was a big box of hotel chocolates. 50 quid's worth of chocolates. Not a bad deal, And that kind of hit our target audience as well, because a lot of the target audience for Murder Mystery are women in their sort of 30s and 40s. There's a big demographic there. With traditional content marketing, what we would normally think of as content marketing, which is either making videos and putting them on YouTube or writing blogs and putting them on your blog, you've got two major barriers. There are 50 million odd YouTube channels. There are 500 million odd blogs. There's only 2 million podcasts. And in fact, that's too many. There's just under 2 million podcasts. But even with everything that happened over the pandemic, with everybody sort of jumping on the podcast bandwagon, there's still only about 2 million podcasts. And so it's a very easy route to market. It's a lot less technical than doing video. That whole video element, it causes so many problems, quite apart from the fact that you need a fairly beefy computer to do anything which isn't bog standard, sat in front of a screen YouTube videos. You don't have any of that. You could get started making a podcast for about 30 quid, and that's just for a cheapish USB microphone. So.
Yeah, I mean, the barrier to entry is really low. You mentioned there's about 2 million podcasts around at the moment. I read an interesting statistic recently which suggested that only 21% of podcasts are active. So it's only a small percentage of those 2 million which are being maintained. So I think there is a huge opportunity for anybody who wants to get involved with podcasting and is willing to, to stick it out.
Completely, and that consistency is so important. And it's the same reason that people stop doing YouTube. It gets a little bit difficult and then they stop doing it. Here's the thing. When I was making photography videos, now there's a little bit of an extra lag on a photography video because of extra stuff you've got to do. So when I was making photography videos, I would go out on a day to take pictures. That was my job. That was the video that I was making. I'd come home. I'd have to edit those pictures, which if you've done any photography and you might take, I suppose, 10 or 20 shots that are any good in one day. You have to have the time to edit those. So that took about half a day to kind of edit those. If you're very unlucky, you'll take about a day to edit those. So that's 2 days so far that we've spent making a video, and yet we've not got anything out of it other than the pictures that we might be able to post on social media. So then you actually have to edit the video itself. And because it's photography and because it's YouTube, people expect certain things of it. They expect a certain level of quality from it. And you know what? The more that YouTubers are growing in competence, the more they're going to expect from new YouTubers as well. So where we were 2 years ago, when I first started, a point where you could arguably make a video with a webcam, and if the information was good enough, you go, yeah, that's great, that's fine, I'll go and watch that video. And you could make that video with a Blue Snowball, those white microphones that they plug into your computer. They're not very expensive, but they don't sound incredible. What you could do that, and you could do it today, and you might get some traction. If you do that with better equipment, it is going to have an impact in a way that, like I said, a couple of years ago, it wouldn't have had that much impact. Because a couple of years ago, half of the people on YouTube were using Logitech cameras. Most of the people were using Blue Yetis. The reason that people use the Blue Yeti so much is because almost every business person got one. It was a cheap microphone that gave you fairly good sound for not much money.
You're absolutely right what you say there about the equipment. And I mean, I found that myself just over the past few months with this podcast. I've had to invest more money into a better computer because I want to do better quality video versions of the episodes on my old system. Wasn't able to do that, so there was money invested into that, money invested into better editing software. And yeah, so I can totally appreciate that, because your competition is everybody else who's doing a similar thing. So if somebody else is using or has better produced audio, better produced video, and you don't, well, you're already paying catch up to them, so I can totally appreciate what you're saying with that.
So at that point, talking of a photography video, you've got 3 days of actual work there, 3 days taken out of your week, because when you're rendering a video out, you can't do anything else on your computer. And if you're doing something at, everyone's pushing to do 4K now. If you're doing something at 4K, that's going to be a long video to wait for as well, because of all of the stuff that your computer has to deal with, plus all of the editing problems that working with 4K comes with it, all of the storage space problems that 4K has, and God forbid you actually start producing stuff in 8K, which don't even bother. There's no point, but still, all of those problems that you get with video are gone. And so with podcasting, all you've got to do really is sit down for an hour a week and speak into a microphone. You don't have to do the video element of it. In fact, many people don't do the video element of it, and they have really successful podcasts. And I think the only reason that Tash and I are, is because we've got that performing arts background. We don't mind being on camera, and we've got editing experience within the group. And we can do it all for free and cheap, and it's not going to impact us to have the video, so we might as well have the video going out there. But what we've decided to do actually is that video is only going to be available for our Patreons. That's what they get if they sign up to Patreon. And anybody who signs up to Patreon for Murdering a Podcast, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later, is the money isn't going to go to Tash and I. The money is going to go into the Mystery Lounge pot. And Mystery Lounge is a legitimate company. It's what's called a CIC, which is a community interest company. Now, that's the British version of a non-profit company. So we're not making any money from it going into the Mystery Lounge. That money will actually pay for productions. It'll actually pay for stuff that will get onto a screen or onto a podcast or something like that. But we have another band of monetization with our podcast as well, where we've gone, okay, but if they do want to donate just to me and Tash so that we can keep this podcast going, we'll have some merchandise, we'll have a donate button, or we'll have other stuff as well, because we don't want to limit the way that people can donate to us, if you see what I mean. We want to make it as open as possible. And this is something that a good friend of mine has been talking recently about treating yourself like you are the publisher, not like you're the platform. So the idea behind that is if you sell a product, usually you sell a product to a specific market, and you're the person who goes out there and markets it, and they come to you and they'll follow your sales funnel or whatever. At that point, you are the platform that they buy from. You are the shop that they buy from. But if you sell DVDs, if you're Warner Brothers, for example, and you sell DVDs, or if you sell audiobooks or books or something like that, you don't do it like that. You put your product on every single platform that you can get on. So it's not just on Amazon, it's on there's audiobooks, it's on Audible, but it's on all the other audiobook platforms as well. So it's spreading the amount of places where people can click a button and buy your thing. And I wanted to do that with a podcast as well. We wanted to spread as many places where somebody can click a button and support us, and then have that choice between what do they want to support. Do they want to support the project that we're making, or do they want to support the podcast that they're listening to? And that's up to them.
Yeah, so I do want to move on to the new podcast, then, Murdering a Podcast, which I'm sure some people will say is what I do here in every episode. but what I did want to ask was, how has that evolved from what you did with the previous incarnation of Viral Murders? But I assume what you've just mentioned there with the Patreon and splitting it up into the community company and then also yourselves as publishers, then I assume that's part of that process.
It is all part of that process, yeah. So Viral Murders came to an end, and we all thought that actually having that podcast, even though it's costing us money to do it, was a good way of promoting what we do. Because if somebody says to you, oh, well, we run murder mystery things, you can't really experience that. But if you say to somebody, well, look, we've got this podcast, which we've got, you can go and listen to now and it's free, then so for us, that podcast is a marketing tool. But realistically, in doing that, we have to write scripts for it, we have to cast it, we have to film it, we have to record it, we've got to edit it. And that's not an easy or slow process. Sorry, that's not easy or fast process. It is a slow process. That was the point I was trying to make. So it's a process that we worked out we could get about 6 episodes of something created, sort of half-hour podcast created, and do that every year. And again, my kind of radar but this isn't the consistency that we need kind of went off. And so I'd said to Tash, okay, you're working on that, you're writing your scripts for that. I'm going to go off and work on something slightly different, set in the same universe, only in the 1800s instead of in now. So still set in Kiltondale. So Tash's thing is we haven't properly settled on a name for it, but it's something like the Kiltondale Case Files or something like that. And mine is called The Adventures of Lord Peregrine Faulkner, the Gentleman Psychic. And it is a more traditional comedy half-hour with a mystery element in it as well. So I'm really going back to my roots, you know. And so, okay, we've got to come up then with 12 scripts between us, which isn't as bad. It's a lot of work, but it's still not as bad. And that's going to give us 1 podcast a month. And so as we were working on this, I suddenly thought, people are going to be interested in the process of doing that, because that's not a normal thing. So why don't we document that, and why don't we put that documentary, that's not quite right, on a podcast, plus advice that we've got for other people who've writing, because both of us have been writing for a long time now, you know. That was how Murdering a Podcast was born. It was just, the idea was to track our journey into making these podcasts, to figure out some stuff along the way, to talk about the problems with hiring and working with actors, or the issue of setting up a studio, for example, if that's the route that we're going to take, because we don't know at the moment the route that we're going to take. That you will literally find that out with us as we do the process and then record these podcasts. So the first couple of episodes, we've got a kind of a welcome episode, but then we start talking about writing, because it's what we know the best. And so we're talking about things like world building and story structure and dialogue, and you know, we'll cover everything that we can that will show people how they themselves can do essentially what we're doing. Because I know that there's creative people. There's so much creativity out there. And the one push that creative people don't have is somebody saying, okay, why don't you go and do it yourself? And so one of the things that we can do in Murdering a Podcast, which is going to be weekly, and it means that we can keep that consistency going, is we can interview people who have done this before. And I want to give people the feeling that actually they can do the stuff that we're doing without too much hassle. They can write something, they can produce something, and they can put it out into the world and get feedback from it.
Yeah, so if you're going to have guests on Murdering a Podcast, then I suppose that gives you quite a broad scope then, because you could have writers, you could have actors and all sorts of different people as well, then to really create some interesting and diverse content.
Writers, producers, editors. I want to talk to other people who are doing similar things to us. I want to talk to people who are doing completely different things to us that nevertheless end up being connected. I will talk to people about, marketing, because there is an element of marketing that you've got to do with everything that you do, whether it's a creative project or whether it's a podcast, Not to say that podcasts aren't creative, but you know what I mean.
I mean, from the marketing side of things, then, are you going to be promoting Murdering a Podcast in any different way to how you promoted the previous one?
Well, we're not throwing money at adverts for a start. And I really want to see initially kind of what the organic growth is going to be like. I know, again, through doing YouTube, it's one of those instances where if you keep doing it and keep doing it consistently, and you get interesting titles and you get enough guests on who are interesting to your niche, not to, every other niche, then you'll slowly build an audience. And from what we saw with the other one, I think you can build an audience a lot quicker than you can on YouTube, because the idea of having, 1,000, 1,000 downloads for a podcast, that's like stage 2. Stage 1 is 500 downloads an episode. Then stage 2 is 1,000. So, I don't expect that to take as long as it took me on YouTube, because we don't have the people that we've got to fight against in order to get into those same categories. Plus, once you start interviewing people who are interesting, and if we can start interviewing people who have got a bit of a name, then people who like podcasts will search for those names as well, and then that kind of adds a sort of snowball effect to it as well. So, we're definitely going down a more traditional podcast promotion technique than spending a ton of money on ads. Although I do want to run a platform called Red Circle, and they've got their own cross promotion thing on that, so we'll go on to that, because why not?
It sounds like you're going to be quite strategic in how you're getting people onto the show to be interviewed as well. So if you get somebody who's quite well known, and then you approach somebody else who is quite well known, and you can always refer back to the episode which has got the first guest on there,
the first person,
and there'll be that element then of, well, if it's good enough for them, then it's good enough for me.
Well, this is one of the things I go over in the upsell to the product. So you mentioned it before. I've got 2 products. One of which is called Podcast Advantage, and that takes you from that'll take you from 0 to launch. So you haven't got anything, you haven't got any ideas. We'll go over how to find ideas, how to create your artwork, how to actually record, how to EQ stuff, how to do the kind of the basics, and then actually go on to launch week as well, and the sort of the best practices that you can do to get yourself out there and to get people interested in what you do. And then the other one is called Podcast Masterclass, and I deal with some extra stuff like how to speed up your editing using plugins, which plugins you can use, and there's 3 of them, which I won't reveal here because I want you to buy the course. There's 3 of them which I've used, and it takes something that could have been about an hour to edit down, 2 voices and EQ everything, and it does it in minutes. We'll move on from that, and then we talk about monetization. I talk about the one monetization thing which actually nobody really talks about too much, but is incredibly important, and how to do that, and that's sponsorship. And I also talk about guesting, because guesting is the number one way that people are actually growing not only their podcast, but their authority when it comes to not just being on a podcast, but having your own podcast. So, being on somebody else's podcast is a real boost to you and your podcast, because you're getting your name around more.
Yeah, that's something that I've been really lazy with as well. At the start of the year, I said I'm going to make a concerted effort to appear on lots of different people's podcasts this year, and it hasn't really happened, no.
Well, we're hopefully a bit luckier because, Tash and I are the kind of the hosts of the thing, and whilst I'm taking control really of of murdering a podcast, whilst Tash is busy doing a lot of writing, but I'm hoping that we'll both be on different people's shows and things, depending on the things that those shows might be interested in hearing from us.
So with regards to the Podcast Advantage product, I mean, what else can people expect from that training program? And if they've been listening to this episode and they think, yeah, podcasting is something that I want to give a go to, how else can the training help them?
Well, it really is meant to go from I don't know anything about podcasting to you having a professionally produced and a thing that you will have produced yourself, but as professionally as possible, product at the end of it that you can easily and consistently get out your podcast. It's meant to take, like I said, from 0 to launch. But arguably, if you kept going with it and you keep doing the everything that you on a weekly basis, you make your podcast and you launch each one the way that we show you. you'll learn enough to get you to that 500 subscriber mark relatively easily. It's not going to be overnight. I mean, let's face it, it's never overnight, but you'll get there relatively easily. And, it helps you keep that consistency up, because it just gives you a sort of step-by-step way of doing all of these things. I'm revealing a couple of tools that I use that are really good. One in particular that I don't use anymore, but I used to, and is just a phenomenal editing tool, which gives you some very professional results right off the bat. And we've got a few kind of form templates and things, so that when you're writing your show notes, you've got a process to follow, so it's not quite as difficult as having a blank piece of paper and going, oh, well, what did we do on this show? That you've got an idea about what you can put in there that's going to hopefully help engage people, because that's one of the things that you need to do with show notes. So yeah, the whole thing is really set out to not only say to people, you can do this, and this is how easily you can do it, but to give them a fairly easy to follow step-by-step process to actually doing it themselves, and once they've done it, to keep that consistency up.
That sounds great. If anybody wants more information on how they can get their hands on a copy of that program, where is the best place for them to find it?
Well, I tell you what, if you go to murderingapodcast.com/PCA. Great.
I'll also get the link from you, and I can put that in the description as well, so everybody can get easy access to that. And if anybody wants to find out more about you, if they want to connect with you personally, how can they do that as well?
Well, again, the easiest place is murderingapodcast.com, where we've got information about the show and what we do, and how people could get in touch.
Okay, excellent. So everything all under one roof, no confusion.
That's the idea, yeah.
So just before we go then, can you give us a bit of info then about what are your plans then for the remainder of the year? What can people expect from you?
Well, obviously, writing-wise, I've got to get the Peregrine and Faulkner scripts written. I've got 1.5 done, and I need 6, so there's a big chunk of work to do there. But I really enjoyed writing the first one, and I've got some great ideas for the kind of it's farcical. It's somewhat Goon Show-esque. I suppose you might call that Python-esque if you're in the States. And every week, Peregrine's companion, the Peregrine and Windsor are basically Holmes and Watson, only comic versions of them. So Peregrine is the detective that actually always gets things wrong. You just don't realise. And Windsor is the doctor who comes up with the most ridiculous ideas and tries to test them out. So in episode 1, he thinks that he can find the secret of eternal youth in a packet of instant custard. And that's... Yeah, playing with that is my next job once this is done. But I've also got other products that I want to put out because, again, I want to help people do things that they are currently struggling doing. So in my head, I've already planned out a thing called Mobile Photography Secrets. I've already bought the domain for it, actually. And that's going to be how you can use your mobile phone to take better pictures if you're going to put something on Etsy or you're going to put something on eBay even. How you can take better pictures with your mobile phone and some editing things that you can do with that, and how to do sort of more close-up macro photography, again, with just your mobile phone, which is pretty cool. Getting the best results with your mobile phone so that you can do that, and use that to help sell your services. And then I wanted to do mobile video secrets as well, which is how to take your mobile phone and film with it and get some really, really good results with your mobile phone, which you actually could... I mean, I know that there has been at least one film that has been made on a mobile phone and shown at international film festivals. And you can do that too. And if you can bring that sort of quality into the sales videos that you do, into any YouTube videos that you put out, anything like that, then you're going to get better traction. It's just, again, seeing what is around, especially in the internet marketing niche, seeing what is around where everything is cheap and dirty and nasty, or at least it looks cheap and dirty and nasty. I kind of want to raise the level of that a little bit. And so the next lot of products that I'm producing are all going to be connected with that. And then it's just a case of figuring out how to kind of resell what I've already got so that it reaches a wider audience.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot to keep you busy for the rest of the year then.
Very much so.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on the episode today, Steve. It's been great having you on here, getting to know you a bit better, and the podcast that you're working on now, it sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to listening into it as well. That Secret of Eternal Youth in a packet of custard, that's my kind of humour.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited for people to hear it. And thank you very much for having me on. It's been really great fun.
No, my pleasure. Thanks again for coming on, and I'll keep in touch with you on social media, no doubt. If you enjoy Engage, please show your support at engagersclub.com, our exclusive members-only club with enough content, training, and behind-the-scenes access to keep you going until the next episode. That's engagersclub.com. Also, please rate and review this podcast wherever you download them. Stay engaged.